The plane captain collapsed. Everyone was screaming. The first officer couldn't land alone. Then a 14-year-old girl in seat 12B stood up and said, "I can help." Nobody believed her. But Maya Chin knew things about flying that could save 200 lives, if adults would just listen. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Maya Chin pressed her nose against the small airplane window, watching clouds drift past like cotton balls scattered across blue fabric. At 14 she had taken this flight from Denver to Los Angeles dozens of times, but she never got tired of seeing the world shrink below. Other passengers barely noticed her tucked into seat 12B, just another teenager with a backpack full of schoolbooks and a phone that never seemed to leave her hands. "Would you like some extra pretzels, sweetie?" asked Linda, the flight attendant with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had been working flights for 20 years and had a soft spot for young travelers flying alone. "Or maybe some juice. The flight's going to be another 2 hours." Maya looked up from her tablet, where complex flight simulator controls filled the screen. "Thanks, but I'm okay," she said quietly. Linda glanced at the screen and saw what looked like a video game with airplanes. She smiled and moved on, thinking how nice it was that kids could stay entertained these days. The businessman in seat 12A barely looked up from his laptop when Maya accidentally bumped his elbow while reaching for her water bottle. He shifted slightly away, the way adults do when they want to create distance from chattering children on long flights. The elderly woman across the aisle smiled at Maya once, the polite kind of smile grown-ups give to kids they don't really want to talk to. Nobody knew that Maya had been studying aviation manuals since she was 10. Nobody knew that her father, Captain James Chin, had died in a small plane crash 3 years ago, but not before teaching his curious daughter everything he could about flying. Nobody knew that Maya had memorized emergency procedures, studied weather patterns, and spent countless hours on professional flight simulators that her father's pilot friends let her use at the local airport. To everyone around her, she was just a quiet kid doing homework or playing games. They had no idea that the game on her tablet was actually a certified flight training program, or that the book she was reading wasn't a school assignment but a technical manual about aircraft systems. Maya had learned to keep her passion hidden after too many adults smiled and patted her head when she tried to talk about aviation, dismissing her knowledge as cute but meaningless child's play. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, professional and calm. "Good afternoon, folks. This is Captain Rodriguez speaking. We're cruising at 35,000 feet with clear skies ahead. Flight attendants, please prepare for our descent into Los Angeles. We should have you on the ground right on time." Maya glanced toward the cockpit door, wondering what it would feel like to sit in the captain's chair for real instead of in a simulator. She had dreamed about it so many times, but at 14 she was still 7 years away from even getting a private pilot's license. Her father had always said that dreams were worth nothing without knowledge and preparation, which was why Maya studied every chance she got. "Attention passengers, we're beginning our initial descent," announced First Officer Williams over the speakers. "Please return your seats to the upright position and secure any loose items." Maya put away her tablet and fastened her seatbelt, settling in for what should have been a routine landing. She had no way of knowing that in 15 minutes, everything would change forever. The first sign of trouble was Captain Rodriguez's voice cutting out mid-sentence during his weather update. Maya noticed immediately because she always listened carefully to cockpit communications, but other passengers were busy with their phones or gathering their belongings for landing. Then came the sound that made Maya's blood turn cold, a loud thump from the cockpit, followed by muffled voices and what sounded like someone falling. "Ladies and gentlemen," First Officer Williams' voice came over the intercom, but something was different. His usual calm professionalism was cracking around the edges. "We're experiencing a minor delay in our descent. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Minor delay. Maya knew that wasn't true. She could feel the airplane's movements changing, becoming less steady and more erratic. The nose was dropping too quickly, then pulling up too sharply. Someone in the cockpit was struggling. 3 flight attendants rushed toward the front of the plane, their faces tight with worry. Linda's hands were shaking as she unlocked the cockpit door with her key. Through the brief opening, Maya heard First Officer Williams' panicked voice. "He's not breathing. I don't know what to do. I can't fly this thing alone." The cockpit door slammed shut, but the damage was done. Several passengers had heard those terrifying words, and whispers began spreading through the cabin like wildfire. Did he say he can't fly alone? What happened to the captain? Are we going to crash? Maya's heart was pounding, but her mind was crystal clear. She recognized the signs from her father's stories and her countless hours of emergency simulation training. The captain had suffered some kind of medical emergency, probably a heart attack or stroke. The first officer was panicking, which meant he wasn't experienced enough or confident enough to handle the situation alone. The airplane tilted sharply to the left, causing overhead bins to rattle and passengers to gasp in fear. Whatever was happening in the cockpit, it wasn't good. Then came the announcement that changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," First Officer Williams' voice was shaking now, barely controlled. "I need to inform you that Captain Rodriguez has suffered a medical emergency and is unconscious. I am not qualified to land this aircraft alone in these conditions. We are declaring an emergency." The cabin erupted in chaos. People started crying, praying, calling loved ones on their phones. The businessman next to Maya was frantically typing what looked like goodbye messages. The elderly woman across the aisle was whispering prayers with tears streaming down her face. Maya closed her eyes and heard her father's voice from 3 years ago. "Maya, if you're ever in an emergency, don't panic. Think through what you know. Trust your training even if everyone else is falling apart." She opened her eyes and looked around the cabin. Adults were screaming, crying, and falling apart. The flight attendants were trying to maintain order, but Maya could see the terror in their eyes too. Everyone was convinced they were going to die. Everyone except Maya. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice cutting through the chaos in the cabin. Nobody heard her over the crying and praying and panicked phone calls. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "Excuse me. I can help." The businessman in 12A looked at her with irritation. "Sit down, kid. This isn't a game." But Linda, the flight attendant, was closer and heard something in Maya's voice that made her pay attention. "Honey, what did you say?" Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. "I said I can help. I know how to land this plane." For a moment, the entire section around seat 12B went quiet. Then the businessman started laughing. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of hysterical laugh people make when stress breaks their minds. "A kid," he said. "A kid thinks she can save us? This is insane." Other passengers were staring now, their faces showing everything from disbelief to anger to desperate hope. "You don't understand," Maya said, her voice getting stronger. "My father was Captain James Chin. He flew for United for 15 years before he died. He taught me emergency procedures. I've been studying aviation since I was 10. I know these systems." Linda's eyes went wide. She remembered the name James Chin. He had been well respected in the pilot community before his tragic accident. "Sweetie," Linda said gently, "I know you want to help, but flying is very complicated. Even if your father taught you things, this is a real emergency with hundreds of lives at stake." Maya understood their doubt. She had faced it her whole life. But she also understood something the adults didn't. They were all going to die if someone didn't act soon. The airplane was becoming more unstable by the minute, and First Officer Williams was clearly falling apart. "Listen to me," Maya said, her voice carrying the authority her father had taught her to use in emergencies. "The first officer is panicking. I can hear it in his voice and feel it in how the plane is moving. If he tries to land alone in this state, we will crash. I'm not saying I'm better than him. I'm saying I can help him because I'm not afraid and I know the procedures." She looked around at the terrified faces surrounding her. "My father always said that in aviation knowledge matters more than age. He made sure I knew what to do in situations like this. I've practiced emergency landings hundreds of times in professional simulators. I know the approach speeds, the flap settings, the radio calls. I know what switches to flip and when to flip them." The elderly woman across the aisle was studying Maya's face. "You're serious, aren't you, dear?" "Yes, ma'am. I am completely serious." Linda was torn between disbelief and the growing realization that Maya wasn't just another teenager playing pretend. There was something different about this girl, a calmness and knowledge that didn't match her age. "Even if you know these things," Linda said carefully, "the first officer would never let a child into the cockpit during an emergency." Maya nodded. "Then you'll have to convince him. Because right now he's so scared he can barely think straight. Having someone there who knows the procedures and isn't panicking might be the only thing that saves us." The airplane shuddered again, harder this time, and several passengers screamed. Through the cockpit door, they could hear First Officer Williams talking rapidly to air traffic control, his voice tight with fear. Linda looked into Maya's eyes and saw something that made her decision. This wasn't a scared little girl making things up. This was someone who might actually know what she was talking about. "Okay," Linda said. "Let me talk to him." Getting First Officer Williams to open the cockpit door took 5 minutes of Linda pounding and shouting through the barrier. When he finally unlocked it, His face was pale and covered in sweat. Captain Rodriguez was slumped over in his seat, unconscious but breathing. "Tom," Linda said urgently, "there's a passenger who might be able to help you." "A passenger?" Williams looked confused and desperate. "Linda, I don't need another person panicking up here. I need another pilot. She says she knows emergency procedures." Her father was Captain James Chin. Williams' eyes widened slightly. He knew that name. James Chin had been a legend in the aviation community, known for his skill and his dedication to safety training. His daughter? Williams shook his head. "Linda, his daughter would be just a kid. I can't have a child in the cockpit during an emergency." "Tom, you just announced that you can't land this plane alone. She's offering to help. What do you have to lose?" Before Williams could answer, Maya appeared behind Linda. She had followed the flight attendant forward despite the protests of other passengers. "First Officer Williams," Maya said in a clear, steady voice, "my name is Maya Chen. I know you're scared, but you're not alone. I can help you run through the emergency checklist and assist with the approach procedures." Williams stared at this 14-year-old girl standing in his cockpit doorway. She was small and young, but there was something in her eyes that reminded him of veteran pilots he had flown with. "You're just a kid," he said weakly. "Yes, sir, I am. But I'm a kid who knows that our approach speed should be approximately 150 knots with full flaps, our decision height should be 200 feet, and you need to declare a full emergency with ground services standing by." Maya stepped closer. "I know you're certified to land this aircraft, First Officer Williams. You just need someone to help you think through it step by step instead of trying to handle everything alone." Williams looked at the unconscious captain, then at his shaking hands on the controls, then back at Maya. "This is crazy," he whispered. "Yes, sir, it is. But we're already in a crazy situation. Let me help you make it less crazy." Something in Maya's voice, the calm confidence that sounded so much like her father, made Williams step aside. "Okay," he said. "But you follow my instructions exactly, and if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately." Maya nodded and stepped into the cockpit, her heart racing but her mind focused. She had dreamed of this moment, but never under these circumstances. The cockpit was exactly like the simulator she had trained on, but everything felt more real, more urgent. The radio was crackling with air traffic control trying to reach them, warning lights were flashing on several panels, and the airplane was still flying erratically. "First, let's get you talking to ATC," Maya said, settling into the jump seat behind the pilots. "They need to know our exact situation." Williams keyed his microphone with shaking hands. "Los Angeles approach, United 447 declaring emergency. Captain is unconscious, requesting priority landing and emergency services." The air traffic controller's voice came back immediately, professional but concerned. "United 447, understand you have unconscious captain. Confirm you have qualified pilot still able to fly aircraft." Williams looked at Maya, uncertainty written across his face. "Tell them you have assistance from a qualified crew member," Maya said quietly. "It's not technically a lie. I may not be certified, but I am qualified for this situation. Los Angeles approach, United 447. Affirmative, I have assistance from qualified crew member. Requesting vectors for ILS approach runway 24 left. Roger United 447, turn left heading 240, descend and maintain 8,000 feet. Emergency services are rolling." Maya watched Williams' hands shake as he attempted to turn the airplane. His movements were too jerky, too uncertain. "First Officer Williams," Maya said calmly, "remember that this airplane wants to fly. Don't fight it, work with it. Small corrections, smooth inputs." Something about her voice seemed to steady him slightly. He took a deep breath and made smaller, more controlled movements. "Good," Maya said. "Now let's run through the approach checklist together." Maya had practiced this scenario hundreds of times in simulators, but she had never imagined doing it for real at 30,000 feet with hundreds of lives depending on her knowledge. "Okay, First Officer Williams," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady, "let's start with the basics. What's our current altitude and airspeed?" Williams checked his instruments. "We're at 8,200 feet, speed 280 knots. "Good. ATC cleared us to 8,000, so let's get there. Reduce power slightly and let the nose come down just a degree or two." Williams made the adjustment, and Maya could feel the airplane settling into a more stable descent. "Perfect. Now, do you see the ILS frequency for runway 24 left on your approach chart?" Williams fumbled through the charts clipped to his control wheel. I can't find it. Everything's moving too fast." Maya had memorized the approach frequencies for major airports years ago, another one of her father's lessons about being prepared. It's 111.5. Dial that into your navigation radio and make sure the course is set to 241 degrees. As Williams set up the navigation equipment, Maya continued the checklist from memory. Landing gear should stay up until we're on final approach. Flaps will go to 15 degrees initially, then 30, then full at 40 degrees as we slow down. Are you familiar with the approach speeds for this aircraft?
Yes, I know them, but I can't think straight, Williams admitted.
That's okay. I'll help you remember. At our current weight, we want to cross the outer marker at about 180 knots with 15 degrees of flaps. Then we'll slow to 150 knots with full flaps for the final approach. The radio crackled again. United 447, turn left heading 210, descend and maintain 6,000 feet. You're 15 miles from the outer marker. Maya watched Williams make the turn, his movements becoming slightly more confident with her guidance. You're doing great, she told him. The airplane is stable, we're on course and you're flying it well. Now let's talk about what happens when we get to the airport. What about Captain Rodriguez? Williams asked, glancing at his unconscious colleague. Maya had been thinking about that too. We need to secure him so he doesn't interfere with the controls during landing. Linda, can you help us with that? The flight attendant, who had been standing in the cockpit doorway watching in amazement, sprang into action. Together with another flight attendant, they carefully moved the unconscious captain away from the controls and secured him in the jump seat. United 447, you're 10 miles from the outer marker, air traffic control announced. Runway 24 left is cleared for your emergency landing. Fire and rescue services are in position. Maya felt her stomach tighten. This was it, the moment of truth. First Officer Williams, she said, I want you to know that you are completely capable of landing this airplane. You've done it hundreds of times before. The only difference is that today you have help from someone who isn't scared and who knows the procedures by heart. Williams looked at her and seemed to draw strength from her confidence. What do I do first? First we configure for approach. Landing gear down. Williams reached for the gear lever and pulled it down. They felt the familiar thunk and vibration as the wheels extended and locked into place. Good. Now flaps to 15 degrees. The airplane's nose pitched slightly up as the flaps deployed, creating more lift and drag. Reduce power and maintain 180 knots, Maya instructed. We want to intercept the glide slope right at the outer marker. The cockpit was filled with the steady beeping of navigation equipment as they lined up with the runway's electronic guidance system. United 447, you are cleared for ILS approach runway 24 left, the controller said. Contact tower on 133.9. Maya helped Williams change radio frequencies and make contact with the tower. Tower, United 447 on approach, declaring emergency, requesting priority landing. United 447, you're cleared to land runway 24 left. Wind is 250 degrees at 8 knots. Emergency services are standing by. They were 5 miles from the runway now, and Maya could see the airport lights growing larger through the windscreen. This is the critical phase, she told Williams. Everything we've practiced leads to this moment. The glide slope indicator showed they were perfectly aligned with the electronic pathway that would guide them down to the runway. Maya had dreamed of this view countless times, the runway growing larger ahead, the precise dance of managing airspeed and altitude, the moment when flying theory became reality. 5 miles out, Maya announced, reading the distance measuring equipment. Flaps to 30 degrees, slow to 160 knots. Williams was getting into a rhythm now, his movements becoming more fluid and confident. The airplane responded smoothly to his inputs. You're flying this perfectly, Maya told him, and she meant it. The approach is stable, the speed is correct, and the airplane is right where it needs to be. Through the cockpit windows, they could see the emergency vehicles lined up along the runway, fire trucks, ambulances, and airport rescue equipment all waiting for their arrival. United 447, you're 3 miles from the runway, looking good on the approach, the tower controller announced. Maya checked their altitude and speed. We're crossing 2,000 feet at 160 knots. Perfect. Now let's configure for landing. Flaps to full. The airplane's nose pitched up more noticeably as the flaps extended to their maximum setting, creating the most lift and drag for the slowest possible landing speed. Reduce power and slow to 150 knots, Maya instructed. The runway was clearly visible now, growing larger every second. Maya could see the touchdown zone markers, the approach lights, and all the emergency vehicles waiting for them. 2 miles out, she announced. Everything looks perfect. You've got this, First Officer Williams. Williams was focused intently on his instruments and the runway ahead. What do I do if something goes wrong at the last second? If we need to go around, add full power, flaps to 20 degrees and climb back to 3,000 feet, Maya said. But that won't be necessary. This approach is beautiful. United 447 1-mile final, cleared to land. Maya's heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. Over the threshold, start reducing power. At 50 feet, begin your flare. Let the airplane settle onto the runway smoothly. The runway numbers, 24L, flashed beneath them as Williams pulled the power back to idle and started raising the nose slightly to slow their descent rate. 40 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet. Maya called out the altitude. Perfect flare. Let it settle. The main landing gear touched the runway with barely a bump, one of the smoothest landings Maya had ever experienced even in simulators. We're down? Williams shouted, his voice filled with relief and disbelief. Keep the airplane straight, Maya reminded him. Apply wheel brakes gradually. We've got plenty of runway. The airplane rolled smoothly down the centerline as Williams applied the brakes. Emergency vehicles began following them, but it was clear that everything was under control. United 447, nice job, the tower controller said, and Maya could hear the relief in his voice too. Taxi to gate A7. Emergency services will meet you there. As they slowed to taxi speed, Williams turned to Maya with tears in his eyes. I couldn't have done that without you, he said. You saved everyone on this airplane. Maya shook her head. We saved everyone. You flew the approach and made the landing. I just helped you remember what you already knew how to do. The airplane came to a stop at the gate, and Maya could hear the passengers behind her beginning to cheer and cry with relief. Emergency medical technicians rushed aboard to attend to Captain Rodriguez, while airport officials and airline supervisors crowded around the cockpit. Who is this girl? Asked the chief pilot who had rushed to meet the flight. I was told there was an unqualified person assisting in the cockpit. First Officer Williams stood up from his seat, steadier now but still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Sir, this is Maya Chin. She's the daughter of Captain James Chin. Without her knowledge and assistance, I don't think I could have made that landing successfully. The chief pilot looked at Maya with a mixture of amazement and confusion. You're just a child. How did you know emergency procedures? Maya was tired now, the adrenaline beginning to fade and leave her feeling empty and strange. My father taught me. He said that aviation knowledge could save lives someday, even if I was too young to be a pilot myself. Linda, the flight attendant, appeared at Maya's side, putting a protective arm around her shoulders. This young lady kept her head when everyone else was panicking. She knew exactly what to do. As word spread through the airport and then to the media, Maya found herself at the center of a story that seemed impossible to most people. A 14-year-old girl had helped land a commercial airliner during an emergency. Aviation experts were called in to verify her knowledge, and they found that she truly understood the systems and procedures she had used. The businessman from seat 12A found Maya in the terminal later, his face red with embarrassment. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I laughed at you when you said you could help. I thought you were just a scared kid making up stories. Maya nodded. A lot of people think that. My father always told me that knowledge and courage don't have age limits, but most adults don't believe that until they see it for themselves. The elderly woman from across the aisle approached too, her eyes still showing traces of tears. Sweetheart, she said, I want you to know that you have a gift. Not just the knowledge you've learned but the strength to use it when it mattered most. Your father would be very proud. Maya felt tears starting in her own eyes for the first time since the emergency began. Thank you, she whispered. Captain Rodriguez was taken to the hospital, where doctors confirmed he had suffered a minor heart attack but was expected to make a full recovery. First Officer Williams was praised for maintaining control of the aircraft under extreme stress, though he continued to insist that Maya deserved most of the credit. In the days that followed, the Federal Aviation Administration launched a full investigation into the emergency landing. They interviewed Maya extensively, testing her knowledge of aircraft systems, emergency procedures and aviation regulations. Miss Chin, said the lead investigator, I have to admit that your understanding of these procedures is remarkable for someone your age. Can you explain how you acquired this knowledge? Maya sat in the conference room at LAX, surrounded by aviation officials, airline executives and FAA investigators. She was still just 14, but the events of Flight 447 had changed how adults looked at her. My father started teaching me about flying when I was 7, she explained. He said that aviation was the family business, and even though I couldn't get my pilot's license until I was older, I could still learn everything about how airplanes work and what to do in emergencies. She told them about the hours spent in flight simulators, the technical manuals she had memorized, the emergency procedures her father had drilled into her memory. He always said that someday, somewhere, someone might need help with an airplane emergency, and if I had the knowledge to help, I should be ready to use it. The investigators were amazed to discover that Maya's knowledge was not just theoretical. She had spent hundreds of hours in certified flight training simulators, practicing everything from normal landings to complex emergency procedures. The simulator time is documented, one investigator noted. She has more simulated flight hours than many commercial pilots had when they got their first jobs. Dr. Sarah Martinez, an aviation psychologist brought in to evaluate Maya's actions, was particularly interested in how a 14-year-old had managed to remain calm during such a terrifying situation. "Maya," she asked, "were you scared during the emergency?" Maya thought about this carefully. "Yes, I was scared. But my father taught me that being scared doesn't matter as much as knowing what to do about it. He said that fear can make you freeze or it can make you focus. I chose to focus." "What did you focus on?" "The procedures, the checklist. Helping First Officer Williams remember what he already knew how to do. I focused on solving the problem instead of thinking about what would happen if we failed." The investigation concluded that Maya's assistance had been crucial to the successful emergency landing. While First Officer Williams was qualified to land the aircraft, his panic and stress had significantly impaired his ability to think clearly and execute proper procedures. Ms. Chen's calm guidance and extensive knowledge of emergency procedures helped stabilize the situation and ensure a safe outcome, the final report stated. The story of the girl in seat 12B who helped land a commercial airliner became international news. Aviation experts debated whether someone so young should have been allowed in the cockpit during an emergency, while others argued that knowledge and competence were more important than age when lives were at stake. Maya found herself invited to speak at aviation conferences, flight training schools and safety seminars. She was uncomfortable with the attention at first, but she began to understand that her story could inspire other young people to pursue aviation and help change attitudes about what children were capable of learning. "A lot of adults think that kids can't understand complicated things like flying airplanes," Maya said during a speech at a pilot training academy. "But knowledge doesn't have an age limit. If you're curious enough to learn and dedicated enough to study, you can master any subject, even if adults think you're too young." The airline industry began discussing changes to emergency procedures based on Maya's experience. Some proposed that flight attendants should receive basic training in aircraft systems so they could provide better assistance during cockpit emergencies. Others suggested that simulators should be made more accessible to young people interested in aviation careers. Maya's story also sparked conversations about how adults often underestimate children's capabilities and knowledge. Educational experts pointed out that many young people were capable of learning complex subjects if given proper instruction and encouragement. "Maya Chin represents something important," said Dr. Robert Hayes, a professor of educational psychology. "She shows us that when we dismiss children's interests as mere hobbies or games, we might be overlooking genuine expertise and capability." First Officer Williams returned to flying after completing additional training and counseling to help him manage stress during emergencies. He often spoke about his experience with Maya, crediting her with teaching him that staying calm and following procedures were more important than trying to handle everything alone. Captain Rodriguez made a full recovery and returned to flying as well. He met Maya several months after the incident and thanked her for her role in saving his life and the lives of his passengers. "Your father raised an extraordinary daughter," he told her. "He would be incredibly proud of what you did." Maya continued her aviation studies throughout high school, spending her free time at the local airport working with flight instructors and aviation mechanics. She had been offered scholarships to several aviation colleges and was already planning her path to becoming a commercial airline pilot. "The emergency on Flight 447 taught me something important," Maya reflected during an interview on her 16th birthday. "It taught me that knowledge is only valuable if you're willing to use it to help others, even when it's scary or difficult." She had learned to balance her aviation passion with other teenage activities. She played soccer, participated in drama club, and maintained excellent grades in all her subjects. But flying remained her first love and her planned career. "Some people ask me if the emergency traumatized me or made me afraid of flying," Maya said. The opposite happened. It showed me that aviation can be unpredictable and dangerous, but also that proper training and knowledge can handle almost any situation. It made me more confident, not less. Linda, the flight attendant from Flight 447, stayed in touch with Maya over the years. She had been promoted to head of passenger services for her airline, partly based on her recognition of Maya's capabilities during the emergency. Maya taught me never to make assumptions about people based on their age or appearance, Linda said. She looked like just another teenager, but she had the knowledge and courage to save hundreds of lives. Now I listen more carefully when anyone offers to help, regardless of how old they are. The aviation industry implemented several changes inspired by Maya's story. Flight attendant training was expanded to include basic aircraft systems knowledge. Simulators became more accessible to young people through partnerships between airlines and schools. And emergency procedures were revised to better utilize any qualified assistance available during cockpit emergencies. Maya earned her private pilot license on her 17th birthday, making her one of the youngest licensed pilots in the country. She flew her first solo flight in a small Cessna similar to the one her father had been flying when he died. Dad always said that flying was about freedom, responsibility, and the courage to reach for the sky, Maya said after her solo flight. I think he would be happy to know that his lessons helped save lives and that I'm still reaching for that sky. At 18, Maya began her training to become a commercial airline pilot, following in her father's footsteps but also creating her own unique path. She carried with her the knowledge that courage and competence weren't determined by age, and that sometimes the most unlikely people could rise to meet extraordinary challenges. The girl in seat 12B had grown up to become exactly what her father had always known she could be, a pilot who understood that flying was about more than just operating an airplane. It was about being prepared to help others when they needed it most, regardless of what anyone else expected based on her age or appearance. Maya's story became a legend in aviation circles, inspiring countless young people to pursue their dreams of flying. But more importantly, it reminded adults everywhere that wisdom and courage could come from the most unexpected sources, and that listening to young voices might just save lives. Years later, as Captain Maya Chin took her seat in the left chair of her own commercial airliner, she would often think back to that terrifying day when she was 14. She remembered the fear, the responsibility, the moment when she chose to speak up instead of staying silent. And she smiled, knowing that her father's lessons had not only saved hundreds of lives that day, but had also launched her own journey toward the sky he had always encouraged her to reach for.